Welcome to TFR Let's Talk. I'm your host, Swapnil Bhartiya, and my next guest is once again Kate Stewart, Vice President of Dependable Embedded Systems at the Linux Foundation. Kate, it's great to have you back on the show.
Great to be back. Thank you for you.
Once again, we are going to talk about the recent executive order, which focuses on cybersecurity, but it also touched upon a lot of things that have very clear association with a lot of things that we have been doing in the open source world, especially when it comes to SBOMs and stuff like that. So if I ask you from your Linux Foundation's perspective, what do you think about this executive order?
Well, it's actually lining up with a lot of the projects that the Linux Foundation has already been working on. And so we've got a fair amount of progress in some of the directions that the executive order is looking for the industry to move towards. In that sense, there's projects like software package day exchange for SBOMs. There's also criteria for what is secure software. There's the Open Secure Software Foundation. OpenSSF is basically tackling a lot of these issues. And we also see projects like Zephyr that have had security teams since the very start that have been focusing on the issues that are being asked for in this executive order. So aligning the projects and making sure we can get to a secure supply chain is a goal for a lot of the projects at the Linux Foundation.
Right, and you used the term supply chain. That's what we need to talk more and more about, as we have talked about earlier also, especially in the, of course, every software has a lot of libraries, dependencies, but open source makes it a bit different because you pull a lot of packages from different sources, you have to track them. So can you quickly talk a bit about SPDX and other projects that do help companies in creating SBOMs or to actually have an inventory of what is going in your software?
Right. Having that inventory is a key part. So two of the projects at the Linux Foundation that have been focusing on this, actually there's three, but two of them is OpenChain. And what OpenChain has been looking at is how companies handle software and how they create that inventory. And when they export that inventory, can you trust it? And so that OpenChain project has become an ISO standard as of last December. And what it does is it sort of is prescriptive about what companies should do. So the process part, because then SPDX is a data format. And so this is what you can exchange between organizations. And as you sort of move it forward, what you need is tooling. And so there's a variety of projects at the Linux Foundation under the automated compliance tooling umbrella that are used to generating software bill of materials or consuming them. So we've got these projects sitting there to help in the general space. And then in specific spaces, we've got various projects that are working on generating software bill of materials directly, like Zephyr.
Right. I'll talk about Zephyr, but I have one more question for you before that. We touched upon that earlier as well. And that question is that you do have a lot of projects that companies, organizations can use, but do you have any insight into how many companies are either already doing it or planning to do it, or how to help them?
We actually have a survey out right now that we're looking to get feedback from people in terms of what people are actually using, because there's a lot of anecdotal, there's a lot of loud voices, and there's a lot of quiet voices. And trying to get some degree of, okay, what is really happening here and what should we be trying to work on, and put some science behind it and figure out where the real gaps are. That's one of the things we're trying to work on right now at the Linux Foundation.
Excellent. And I would, of course, keep an eye on the survey and its result, and I would love to have you on the show to discuss those results. Now, let's talk about Zephyr. Zephyr solves a specific problem for the community. It's a unique project, but it's been used in so many use cases that we cannot even think of. So what kind of challenge the usage of Zephyr create for companies to come up with build up material, all actually to have an inventory?
Right. Well, the resource-constrained device space has challenges with understanding what is actually in it. So what we kind of need to do is be able to say, okay, when we build an image that we're going to download onto a device, we need to be able to have a software bill of materials for it that we can share in a transparent fashion. So having that software bill of materials and being able to share it is, be able to exchange it is going to be key, because, as people flash their products, they find a vulnerability, they want to update it in the field. You need another inventory. So you need to know exactly what's on a specific device at a specific point in time. And the software bill of materials lets you have a way of summarizing what you don't have in front of you. Because you're not going to go and climb up that tree to go and take down that camera that you've got, pointed at your street or something like that to do a firmware update. You want to work it wirelessly or something like that. So there's these environments and the sensors environments and so forth. All of these need to be potentially updated. And being able to do it in a secure, scalable fashion is going to be essential, because when you have all these devices out there, you do not want them to be attacked. You do not want them to be putting in bad data. So Zephyr's been caring about these types of issues right from the very start of the project 5 years ago. We've had a security team that's been meeting every 2 weeks and has formed a PSERT team, or Product Security Incident Response team. And they're the ones that are triaging the vulnerabilities and generating the information and putting the information in. But the industry as a whole, though, doesn't have a good way of signaling whether or not there's a vulnerability sometimes. Because sometimes we know, oh, you're using this package or using some code derived from here. Maybe there's a vulnerability there. You have to go look at the source file level. And being able to be very crisp and precise at the source file level is where you can tell whether or not you do have a vulnerability. So one of the things that Zephyr's just finished incorporating in the last release is the ability to generate a software bill of materials on every build. So it's an option on the West command, and you can have an SPX SBOM generated. And with that, you have a very complete software bill of materials at a very high fidelity. So you can tell exactly whether or not your software might be impacted by a vulnerability. And this is something, I think it's a bit of a leadership in the industry. I don't think there's that many other ways, there's that many other projects, and for that matter, RTOSs that are able to do this.
Does it also help that you yourself, you are leading so many projects within Linux Foundation? SPDX is one, and then because some of these projects within Linux Foundation, so a lot of cross-pollination happens. So that actually does help projects like Zephyr, because that's already in your DNA.
Yeah, being able to cross-pollinate between the projects is one of the advantages of being in a foundation, and being able to support projects, inside the foundation, and making other groups aware of some of the initiatives, as well as learning from them and understanding their use cases. All of these things make each other stronger. Anything else
before we switch to purely Zephyr, anything else that you want to touch upon from Zephyr security or EOS perspective?
Yeah, well, I think, Zephyr's, the security team has, been dealing with another couple bulk reports. We've got our next LTS coming out shortly. And we're working on improving the code quality in terms of, we're always continually working on it actually, but we're looking at aligning to certain coding guidelines so that we can be ready for doing safety certification after the LTS comes out. And so safety and security most of the times align. They want the same sorts of things, which is high quality code and good best practices. And so as much as we can make sure that it's useful for safety, we're making sure it's useful for security too.
Can you talk about some of the other features of focus of the upcoming LTS?
Sure. So one of the things that we're working on is being able to handle the tool chains and be able to handle multiple tool chains. This is a focus for the group. There is always new devices and new interfaces are being discussed. Certainly, how we're handling the hardware abstraction layers is an active topic right now in the TSC, and so how we're going to look at scaling more devices going in through the HALs as well as native drivers. These are discussions that will resolve should be resolved for the LTS. And then after the LTS comes out, that's where we're going to be taking a subset of the features and going after safety certification. So the project has already hired a functional safety manager to work with us and to help assemble the artifacts. And as we get the LTS out, we'll be starting to assemble all these artifacts and work with the certification authority.
The Zephyr community has been growing. You have more than 1,000 contributors. of course, there are a lot of resources out there, but if I ask you, if somebody wants to get involved with the project or the community, how they can get involved. And also one thing is that code contribution is not the only way one can get involved. Documentation is there. So can you just, quickly talk about how one can get involved and what are the areas they can get involved with?
Sure. So in our project documentation, there's a contributing section, and that will give you an indicator as to sort of where to go in. But the heart of the project is in two places. It's in the GitHub repo and the Zephyr, and it's also in the Slack channel. And so the Slack channel tends to be where the community interacts and asks questions and talks about new things that are happening. And in the repo, we have a large number of pull requests and issues that are being discussed in those threads. That is probably the best way to sort of start. And so I just read the docs, and then contributions are welcome in many ways. Certainly, in addition to code, obviously, help improving our docs, help making things visible, presenting on behalf of Zephyr, hosting meetups, helping someone learn how to boot Zephyr, remotely, or act as mentors. All these things are very much welcomed and appreciated.
Kate, thank you so much for once again taking your time out and talk about not only the executive order, but how Zephyr is already ready for it, but also talk about the next release. And as I said, I would love to have you back on the show whenever the survey results are out. Thank you.
Thank you.